Chapel of the Medici, a splendid structure, decorated with costly stones, and monuments of several members of the royal family. St. Croce, a handsome church, full of monuments of eminent men, is also called the Italian Pantheon. The sculptures are beautiful, and the paintings are good. The remains of Michelangelo rest here, and the Buonaparte family possess a vault beneath the side chapel. Another chapel of considerable size contains some exquisite statues of white marble. St. Annunziat is rich in splendid frescoes. Those placed round the walls in the courtyard of the church, and surrounded by a glass gallery, are particularly handsome. On the left as we enter we find the costly chapel of Our Lady dell'Annunziata, in which the altar, the immense candelabra, the angels and draperies, in short everything is of silver. This wealthy church contains an addition with some good pictures and a quantity of marble. St. Michel is outwardly beautified by some excellent statues. The interior displays several valuable paintings and an altar of great beauty, beneath a white marble canopy in the Gothic style. St. Spirito contains many sculptures, among which a statue of the Saviour in white marble claims particular attention. All these churches are rather dark from having stained windows. Foremost among the palaces we may reckon the Palais Pitti, built on a little hill. This structure has a noble appearance, constructed entirely of pieces of granite. It seems calculated to last an eternity. Of all the palaces I had seen, this one pleased me most. It would be difficult to find a building in the same style which should surpass it. As a rule, indeed, I particularly admired the Florentine buildings, which seemed to me to possess a much more decided national appearance than the palaces of modern Rome. The picture gallery of this palace numbers 500 paintings, most of them masterpieces, among which we find Raphael's Madonna della Sedia. Besides the pictures, each apartment contains gorgeous tables of valuable stone. Behind the palace the Boboli Gardens rises, somewhat in the form of a terrace. Here I found numerous statues distributed with much taste throughout the charming alleys, groves, and open places. From the higher points a splendid view is obtained. The Palace degli Uffizi on the Arno has an imposing effect, from its magnificent proportions and peculiar style of architecture. Some of the greatest artistic treasures of the world are united in the 20 halls and cabinets and 3 immense galleries of this building. The Tribuna contains the Venus de Medicis found at Tivoli, and executed by Cleomenes, a son of Apollodorus of Athens. Opposite to it stands a statue of Apollino. In the centre of the hall of the artist's portrait gallery we find the celebrated Medician vase. The cabinet of jewels boasts the largest and finest onyx in existence. The Palazzo Vecchio resembles a fortified castle. The large courtyard, surrounded by lofty arcades, is crowded with paintings and sculptures. A beautiful fountain stands in the midst, and 2 splendid statues, one representing Hercules and the other David, adorn the entrance. The glorious fountain of Ammanato, drawn by sea-horses and surrounded by Tritons, is not far off. In the Gherardesca Palace we find a fresco representing the horrible story of Ugolino. The Palazzo Strozzi should not be left out of the catalogue. It has already stood for 360 years, and looks as though it had been completed but yesterday. In the Specola we are shown the human body and its diseases, modelled and waxed by the same artist who established a similar cabinet at Vienna, in the Josephineum. In the Museum of Natural History stuffed animals and their skeletons are preserved. The traveller should not depart without visiting the workshops for hard stones, where beautiful pictures, table slabs, etc., are put together of Florentine marble. Splendid works are produced here. I saw flowers and fruits constructed of stone, which would not have dishonoured the finest pencil. The enormous table in the Palace degli Uffizi is said to have cost 40,000 ducats. 25 men were employed for 20 years in its construction. It is composed of Florentine mosaic. This table did not strike me particularly; it appeared overloaded with ornament. Of the environs of Florence I only saw the Grand Duke's milk farm, a pleasant place near the Arno, amid beautiful avenues and meadows. Departure from Florence, December 3rd. At 7 in the evening I quitted Florence, and proceeded in the mail carriage to Bologna, distant about 80 miles. When the day broke we found ourselves on an acclivity commanding a really splendid view. Numerous valleys extending between low hills opened before our eyes, the snow-clad Apennines formed the background, and in the far distance shone a gleaming stripe, the Adriatic Sea. At 5 in the evening of December 4th we reached Bologna. This town is of considerable extent, numbers 50,000 inhabitants, and has many fine houses and streets. All of these, however, are dull, with the exception of a few principal streets. Beggars swarm at every corner, an unmistakable token that we are once more in the States of the Church. December 5th. This was a day of rest. I proceeded at once to visit the cathedral, which is rich in frescoes, gilding, and arabesques. A few oil paintings are also not to be overlooked. In the church of St. Dominic I viewed with most interest the monument of King Enzio. The picture gallery contains a St. Cecilia, one of the earlier productions of Raphael. A fine fountain with a figure of Neptune graces the principal square. In the Palazzo Pubblico I saw a staircase up which it is possible to ride. The most remarkable edifices at Bologna are the two square leaning towers at Porta Romagna. One of these towers is 5, and the other 7 feet out of the perpendicular. Their aspect inspired me with a kind of nervous dread. On standing close to the wall to look up at them it really appeared as though they were toppling down. In themselves these towers are not interesting, being simply constructed of masonry and not very lofty. The finest spot in Bologna is the Campo Santo, the immense cemetery, with its long covered ways and neat chapels, displaying a number of costly monuments, the works of the first modern sculptors. 3 large and pleasant spots near these buildings serve as burial places for the poorer classes. In one the men are interred, in the second the women, and in the third the children. A hall 3 miglia in length, resting on 640 columns, leads from this cemetery to a little hill, surmounted by the church of the Madonna di St. Luca, and from thence almost back into the town. The church just mentioned contains a miraculous picture, namely, a true likeness of the Virgin, painted by St. Luke after a vision. The complexion of this picture is much darker than that of the commonest women I have seen in Syria. But faith is everything, and so I will not doubt the authenticity of the picture. The prospect from the mountains is exceedingly fine. I returned in the evening completely exhausted, and in half an hour afterwards was already seated in the post-carriage to pursue my journey to Ferrara. On the whole the weather was unfavourable, it rained frequently, and the roads were mostly very bad, particularly in the domains of the Pope, where we struck fast 4 or 5 times during the night. On one occasion of this kind we were detained more than an hour, until horses and oxen could be collected to drag us onwards. We were 12 hours getting over these 54 miles, from 6 in the evening until the same hour in the morning. December 6th. This morning I awoke at Ferrara, where the carriage was to be changed once more. I availed myself of a few spare hours to view the town, which on the whole rather resembles a German than an Italian place. It has fine broad streets, nice houses, and a few arched ways in front of them. In the centre of the town stands a strong castle, surrounded by fortifications. This was once the residence of the bishop. At 9 o'clock we quitted this pretty town, and reached the Po an hour afterwards. We were ferried across the stream, and now, after a long absence, I once more stood on Austrian ground. We continued our journey through a lovely plain to Rovigo, a place possessing no object of interest. Here we stayed to dine, and afterwards passed the Adige, a stream considerably smaller than the Po. The country between Rovigo and Padua was hidden from us by an impenetrable fog, which prevented our seeing 50 paces in advance. At 6 o'clock in the evening we reached Padua, our resting place for the night. Early next morning I hastened onwards, for I had already seen Padua, Venice, Trieste, etc., in the year 1840. I reached